The rain had been falling since dawn, whispering against the classroom windows like an unwelcome reminder that warmth was meant for other places. Ms. Hayes stood at the front of the room, her expression carved from stone. The students sat motionless, pencils untouched, eyes heavy with quiet defeat. No laughter, no whispers. Just the ticking of the clock, slow, merciless, like a heartbeat counting down to another round of failure. Eli watched her, sensing something behind that stern face. Not anger, but sorrow. He didn't know her story, but he could feel it pressing through the silence. Why did she look like someone waiting for an apology that would never come? Outside, thunder rolled, and the lights flickered. Ms. Shrieks? Or Hayes spoke, her voice sharp and final. Every one of you failed. The words struck harder than the storm. And yet, as the class froze, Eli's eyes stayed on her. Was she punishing them, or herself? Sometimes, the harshest lessons aren't written on paper. Sometimes they live behind trembling lips that refuse to admit they're breaking. The bell rings, but no one moves. The sound should mean freedom, but today it only deepens the silence. Ms. Hayes stares at the papers on her desk, as if each one holds a confession. Her fingers tremble slightly. Eli lingers, waiting for the other students to leave. "Why do you even try?" Maya mutters under her breath, but Eli's voice cuts softly through the quiet. "Because she's hurtin'," he says. The words aren't meant for her to hear. Yet somehow she does. That night, Clara sits alone in her kitchen. The clock ticks, the kettle hums, but nothing feels alive. On the fridge hangs the same drawing Lily made years ago, crayon lines of mother and daughter holding hands beneath a sun that no longer shines. Clara runs her fingers across the paper, eyes stinging. Somewhere, deep inside, she wonders if she failed her daughter long before she failed her students. At school the next day, the students whisper about her breakdown the day before, though none of them actually saw her cry. Eli arrives early and places a small paper flower on her desk, simple, made from notebook scraps. When she walks in, she freezes, unsure how to react. No one's given her anything in years. For the first time, the silence between them feels different, not heavy, but waiting. Later that afternoon, during detention, Eli remains after class. He doesn't talk. He just sits, waiting. Ms. Hayes finally breaks the silence. "Why didn't you leave like the others?" she asks. Eli looks at her, calm, eyes steady. "Because someone has to stay when it's hard." The words strike her deeper than he'll ever know. She looks away, blinking back tears she refuses to let fall. Not yet, but her voice softens barely above a whisper. "Class dismissed." It's the first time those words sound like mercy. The week drags on like a gray sky that refuses to clear. Ms. Hayes tries to teach as if nothing's changed, but her voice trembles at the edges. The students notice. She marks the board, erases, writes again, lost in the act of pretending she's in control. Eli watches her, not with rebellion, but curiosity. There's something almost human now in her silence, like she's fighting to stay composed while her world quietly unravels. For the first time, her strictness feels less like cruelty and more like a cry for help. During lunch, Ms. Hayes sits alone in the teacher's lounge, staring at her untouched sandwich. Principal Lynn walks in, calm but deliberate. "Clara," he says softly, "you've been pushing them hard. Maybe too hard." She looks up, her face unreadable. "They need discipline," she answers, though her voice lacks conviction. Lynn sighs. "Sometimes they just need to be seen." The words linger. She lowers her eyes. For once, she doesn't argue. Back in class, a math problem fills the board. The students struggle silently. Eli raises his hand, not to answer, but to ask. "Ames, Hayes, did you always want to be a teacher?" The room freezes. Her hand stops midair. For a moment, she's not a teacher, not a figure of authority, just a woman remembering who she used to be. Once, she whispers, a long time ago. It's the first time she's ever given them something honest. That evening, Claire walks home beneath the fading sky. The streets are wet, the air sharp. Children's laughter echoes from somewhere far behind her, a sound that used to belong to her world. She pauses outside a toy shop window where a mother buys her daughter a small red balloon. Clara stares, unmoving. Her reflection overlaps the child's smile in the glass, and for one fleeting second, the past and present blur into one unbearable truth. She's been teaching ghosts. The next morning, Clara arrives before dawn. She opens the classroom blinds and watches sunlight crawl across the empty desks. Her hand brushes the paper flower still resting on her desk. Ali's quiet gift. She hesitates, then picks it up, holding it gently as if afraid it might crumble. Maybe, she whispers to herself. They deserve better than the version of me I became. Outside, the morning light finally breaks through the rain. Something shifts in the air that morning. The classroom still carries its quiet, but it's no longer cruel. Ms. Hayes teaches slower. Now, her voice gentler. When Eli answers a question wrong, she doesn't scold him. She simply says, "Try again." The students glance at each other, uncertain if it's real. Maya's pencil stops tapping. Even the walls seem to breathe again. Change doesn't announce itself. It arrives softly, like sunlight, through rain. At recess, Eli sits under a tree sketching. Ms. Hayes passes by, holding her coffee, pretending not to notice him, but her steps slow. "You like drawing?" she asks, her tone uncertain, like someone learning to speak a new language. Eli shrugs, smiling. "Helps me think." She nods, looking at his paper. "It's good," she says softly, and for the first time, Eli sees something unfamiliar in her face. Pride. Later that day, a surprise fire drill sends everyone rushing outside. Amid the noise, Eli notices Ms. Hayes standing still by the exit, staring into the distance, her face pale. The loud alarms fade in her mind, replaced by another sound, tires screeching, a child's laugh cut short. Her breath catches. Eli runs back to her side, calling her name. She blinks, shaken back to now. "I'm fine," she whispers, but her trembling hands say otherwise. That evening, the rain returns. Ms. Hayes sits by her window, watching droplets trace paths down the glass. She closes her eyes and hears Lily's laughter, echoing faintly, like the past refusing to let go. Then, a knock. Soft, hesitant. She opens the door to find a folded note slipped beneath it. It's from Eli. For tomorrow's lesson, it reads. Inside is a hand-drawn picture. Her, smiling in front of a class full of students. Her heart tightens. She hasn't seen herself smile like that in years. The next day, Miss Hayes begins class with a strange calm. She doesn't start with a test, but with a story about a little girl who loved to learn. The students listen, spellbound. Her voice cracks, just once, but she keeps going. Eli watches quietly, recognizing the girl from her tone. He doesn't know her name yet, but he can feel her in every word. When she finishes, the class claps softly, unsure if it's allowed. Ms. Hayes smiles through trembling lips. Something inside her finally begins to heal. The following morning feels different. Ms. Hayes walks into the classroom without the sharp click of her heels. Her steps are lighter, her voice softer. She asks questions, listens, even smiles once or twice. The students exchange glances, uncertain, hopeful. Eli notices her laughter, fragile but real, like glass that might break if you breathe too hard. For the first time, it feels like the room itself is learning to breathe again. During break, Ms. Hayes finds herself sitting beside Eli under the same oak tree where he always sketches. You drew me smiling, she says quietly, holding the folded paper from before. Eli nods, shy. That's how I think you should look. She looks at him, startled by the simplicity. For years, no one's spoken to her like that, with kindness instead of pity. She doesn't reply, but her eyes soften. And for a moment, she lets herself believe him. Later, Principal Lynn observes Ms. Hayes through the classroom window. She's kneeling beside a student's desk, patiently explaining an answer, something she's never done before. She's changing, he murmurs. The counselor beside him smiles. Maybe she just needed someone to remind her she's human. Inside, Eli catches Ms. Hayes' eye. She nods once. Gratitude without words. That night, Ms. Hayes dreams of Lily again, running down a sunlit path, laughing, turning back to call for her mother. But this time, Clara doesn't freeze. She runs after her. The dream blurs with tears, her heart racing as she reaches out. Just before she touches her daughter's hand, she wakes. For the first time in years, she doesn't cry. She smiles through her trembling breath, whispering, I remember. The next morning, Clara stands before her class holding a box of old photographs. I want to show you something, she says softly. The students gather closer, curious. She takes out a picture of a little girl with freckles and braids. Her name was Lily, she begins, her voice trembling. She was my daughter. The room goes silent. Ely's eyes widen. Why? Hayes continues. I think I stopped believing in others the day I lost her. A hush falls, the kind that feels like prayer. She looks up, meeting Ely's gaze, and smiles through tears. But maybe I'm learning again. The days that follow feel lighter. The classroom hums with quiet laughter, pencils scratching across paper. The soft rhythm of belonging. Ms. Hayes now walks among the desks instead of standing apart. Her students start to try again, not out of fear, but because she finally believes they can. Eli watches her, sensing something unspoken still lingers, the part of her she hasn't shared. Healing never comes all at once. It waits until you're brave enough to open the last locked door. After class, Eli stays behind again. He picks up a fallen photo from her desk, the one of Lily. She looks happy, he says softly. Ms. Hayes nods, her eyes clouding. She whispers. She loved to ask questions. Too many sometimes. Eli smiles faintly. Sounds like me. She laughs through her tears. You remind me of her. The words hang between them, warm and aching at once. That night, Eli lies awake, replaying her words. You remind me of her. He wonders what it must feel like to lose everything and still show up every morning. He thinks of all the ways she hides her pain behind lessons and rules. Somewhere in his chest, a question begins to form. Not out of defiance, but love. What if she never stopped believing in others because she was afraid no one believed in her? The next morning, Miss Hayes finds a folded note on her desk again. Eli's handwriting. She doesn't open it right away. Throughout the lesson, she catches him glancing at her as if waiting. Her pulse quickens, uncertain why a child's note scares her more than anything. When the final bell rings, she unfolds it slowly. Just one line. Have you ever stopped believing in us because someone stopped believing in you? Her hands freeze. The words cut deep. Too deep. She walks to the window, clutching the note like a lifeline. Outside, the playground echoes with laughter. The same sound that once belonged to Lily. Her breath trembles. The truth she's buried for years begins to surface. It isn't anger that breaks her, it's recognition. The words pierce through the armor she built to survive. She presses the note to her chest and whispers, yes. Then her tears finally fall. Not from pain, but release. The next morning, the classroom feels strangely still. Miss Hayes enters with swollen eyes, but a softness the students have never seen. She doesn't hold papers or pens, only Eli's note. Today, she says quietly, we're not going to have a lesson. The students glance at each other unsure. She places the note on the desk, and for a long moment she just breathes. Then she adds, "We're going to talk about what matters." For the first time, everyone listens. Not because they must, but because they want to. "I used to think failure was something to fear," Miss Hayes begins. "That if you fell short, you weren't enough." Her voice wavers but holds steady. "But I failed too. Not just as a teacher, but as a mother." Gasps ripple softly across the room. "My daughter, Lily." Her voice cracks, but she continues. "She loved learning more than anything, and one morning, she didn't make it to school. Her fingers tremble, clutching the photo she carries every day. Silence floods the room, heavy but kind. She places the photograph on her desk and looks at her students. Really looks at them, for the first time. "I think I've been trying to protect myself from pain by shutting out everything that reminded me of her," she admits. "But in doing that, I shut out all of you." Eli lowers his eyes, his heart heavy yet hopeful. "You can start over," he says quietly. Miss Hayes smiles faintly through her tears. "Maybe we all can." The bell rings, but no one moves. One by one, students walk up to Miss Hayes, placing small notes, drawings, and paper cranes on her desk. No one says much. They don't need to. Each note holds what words can't: forgiveness, understanding, and love. When Eli approaches last, he simply says, "Should be proud of you." That's when the tears finally fall, not from sorrow, but gratitude. That evening, as the sun sets, Miss Hayes walks past the playground. The laughter of children fills the air. Once a sound that haunted her, now one that heals her. She closes her eyes, whispering a quiet thank you to the wind. Inside the school window behind her, Eli waves goodbye, his smile wide and certain. Sometimes, one question can change a grade, but sometimes it can change a life. Weeks pass, and the classroom that once felt like a battlefield now feels like a garden, alive with color, laughter, and hope. Ms. Hayes decorates the walls with her students' artwork. She grades softly now, circling mistakes instead of crossing them out. Mistakes, she says, are just proof you're trying. The students smile every time she says it. Even Maya, once defiant, now raises her hand first. And Eli, he just watches quietly, content to see her finally at peace. One afternoon, Principal Lynn stops by, arms crossed but smiling. "You've made quite the turnaround, Miss Hayes," she laughs, eyes crinkling. "Guess I just needed a better reason to teach." Lynn nods. "And needed a reason to believe." She glances at Eli, who grins back, and the principal leaves quietly, knowing something sacred happened in this room. Something no report or grade could ever measure. At the end of the semester, the students surprise her. They hand her a scrapbook titled, "For the Teacher Who Believed Again." Inside are drawings, poems, and letters, each one a reflection of the love she thought she no longer deserved. When she reaches Eli's page, her eyes well up. His words are simple. "You taught us more than lessons. You taught us people can change." She closes the book and whispers, "So did you." As the school year ends, Ms. Hayes stands by the doorway saying goodbye one by one. The children leave smiling, waving, promising to visit. Eli is the last to go. He turns and asks, "Do you still believe, Miss Hayes?" She smiles, eyes glistening. "Now I do, and I won't stop." He nods, that familiar spark in his eyes. For a moment, she sees Lily in him. Not a replacement, but a reminder that love never truly leaves. It just changes form. That night, Miss Hayes sits at her desk at home. The paper flower Eli made rests beside the scrapbook. She opens her old grade book, the one filled with red marks, and quietly tears the pages out. In their place, she writes a single sentence. "Everyone deserves a second chance, including me." She looks toward the framed photo of Lily, smiling softly. "We did it, sweetheart," she whispers. "Outside the night is calm. The rain has finally stopped."